Have you ever thought about what goes on inside someone's head during a profound spiritual experience? Well, today we're diving into this really fascinating text from the 16th century. And believe it or not, it's basically a guide to one of the most intense things a person can go through, a divine vision. Let's get right into it. So let's just start with a huge question. Imagine for a second you have a vision. I mean, something that feels more real than real, and it shakes you to your very core. How on earth would you know if it's a genuine message from God, or just a trick of your own mind, or maybe something else entirely? You see, this isn't just some old historical question. It's a really deep one about truth and our own experience. Okay, so the author of our text has a very specific name for this, an imaginary vision. Now hang on, imaginary here does not mean made up or fake. It just means the vision is seen internally. It's perceived with the soul's interior sight, not with your actual physical eyes. Think of it as this incredibly powerful and vivid internal reality, almost like a real person is standing right there with you. So here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll talk about what these visions actually feel like. Then, we'll get into the author's really cool analogy, the jewel in the locket, to figure out how to spot a real one. We'll also cover the red flags for the fakes, and then tackle this totally paradoxical rule about why you shouldn't even want them in the first place. And finally, we'll see what the author thinks the real goal of a spiritual life is.
All right, let's jump into the author's beautiful main metaphor. It's really the key to understanding the lasting effect of a true divine encounter.
The text tells us to imagine we're holding a gorgeous gold locket. And inside that locket is a priceless jewel, something with immense value and power. Now here's the thing. You haven't actually seen the jewel itself, but you know with absolute, unshakable certainty that it's in there. You can feel its importance just by holding the locket. And that, right there, is the whole idea. The vision itself, that image you see with your inner sight, that's the beautiful locket. It's amazing, for sure, but it's just the container. The real treasure, the jewel, is the actual presence of God inside it. And here's the kicker. Only God has the key to open that locket. The person having the vision is just the one lucky enough to hold it for a moment.
So, how do you know the jewel is real if you can't see it? Well, you know by its effects. A genuine vision leaves behind what you could call a divine fingerprint on your soul. It doesn't just fade away. It leaves you with this deep, lasting peace, a profound sense of humility, and a certainty that it came from God that is so strong, nothing and no one could ever argue you out of it. Its memory becomes a source of real strength for years to come.
Okay, so now we know what to look for in a genuine vision. But what about the other side of the coin? How do you spot a fake?
Our 16th century guide says false visions really only come from two places. The first one is basically psychological, your own overactive imagination. Where someone gets so caught up in an idea that they end up convincing themselves they're seeing something real. And the second source is what the author would call a spiritual deception, a force that's actively trying to mislead you.
And what's so fascinating is just how clear the differences are. A true vision leaves you feeling changed, with a lasting sense of peace and wonder. But a false one, it produces almost no real spiritual benefit. It just feels hollow. It has no real power, and it disappears as quickly as a dream, leaving your soul completely untouched. The real difference, you could say, is the kind of fruit it bears in your life.
So we've just figured out how to tell these incredible experiences apart. But now we get to the most surprising and honestly the most paradoxical piece of advice in this entire text.
Okay, so the author has laid it all out for us. The signs, the effects, the red flags. It's like a practical manual for spiritual discernment. So you'd think the obvious next step would be to use this guide to go find the real thing, right?
Wrong. This is where the author just throws a massive curveball. The single most important rule, after learning everything we've just learned, goes against pretty much every instinct you might have. That's it. The number one rule is to never ask for visions, never want them, and definitely never pray to be led down that particular path. So after explaining just how amazing and valuable they can be, the author insists that you have to actively avoid wanting them. Why? Why would they say that? Well, the author gives 6 incredibly sharp reasons. First, just wanting a vision shows a lack of humility. It's like wanting a reward you haven't earned. Second, that desire literally opens a door ajar for deception to creep in. Third, our minds are so powerful that if you want something bad enough, your own imagination will just cook it up for you. Fourth, it's pretty presumptuous to try and tell God how to guide your spiritual life. Fifth, these special gifts are often paired with some really severe suffering. And finally, Having a vision, it's just not the real test of your devotion.
So if the goal isn't to have these mind-blowing spiritual experiences, then what's the point of it all? What should we be aiming for instead?
Now, the author isn't saying visions aren't helpful. They are a powerful aid. But the argument is that it's far more valuable to develop virtues like patience and humility through your own hard work and effort. In other words, the struggle is actually more important than the supernatural gift.
And that really brings us to the core message of this whole text. The ultimate goal of a spiritual life isn't about collecting cool experiences or receiving these spiritual consolations. The true goal is way simpler and a whole lot harder. It's to desire only to serve and to love without ever looking for a reward.
And that leaves us with one final question to think about. One that's just as relevant today as it was 500 years ago. In any part of our lives, what really holds more value in the end? One spectacular, unforgettable experience, or a whole lifetime of quiet, dedicated service?